A very good afternoon and thank you all for joining us on this edition of Business Today. Today is the 4th of May 2016. My name is Joy Doreen Bira, and on the show today we are focusing on the state of buildings in Nairobi, that is the capital of Kenya. And in studio with us we have Stephen Oundo, who is the chairman of the National Construction Authority, NCA. We also have Dr. Isaac Kalua, who is the chairman for Green Africa. And at our I&M studios, we have Johnson Denge, who is the services manager real estate at Saiton Investments. And they are going to share with us what exactly is happening in Nairobi capital today. Why are we seeing so many buildings collapse? And have we ignored the environmental checks that we should be looking seriously into? That conversation is going to be coming up shortly. Now, on our Twitter poll question this afternoon, we're asking you who should take responsibility for construction of unsafe buildings in Nairobi? Who should take responsibility for the construction of unsafe buildings in Nairobi? And remember, you can take part in this conversation. All you have to do is go to my Twitter handle, that is at Joy Doreen Bira, and respond to this question: who should take responsibility for the unsafe construction of buildings in Nairobi? Now, as at 2 p.m. this afternoon, we were looking at the Twitter poll results as at 2 p.m. and this is ongoing until the end of the show. So at 2 p.m. we were looking at those who were saying the NCA is responsible for all this unsafe construction happening in Nairobi. The percentage was at 32%, and the City Council taking responsibility for this, Twitter respondents said 40%. It actually stood at 40%. And those who think that the landlords are responsible for this unsafe construction of buildings in Nairobi is at about 11%. And those who think the national government should take responsibility are at 17%. So continue to send in your Twitter votes so we can take a look at what you have to say regarding our question. Once again, our question is: who should take responsibility for the unsafe construction of buildings in Nairobi? Is it the NCA? Is it the City Council? Is it the landlords? Or should it be the national government? Take part in that Twitter poll question. Now let's take a look at other stories making headlines in business. And the Kenyan police have arrested a suspected key member of an Islamist militant group that was plotting attacks similar to the 2013 Westgate shopping mall attack that killed at least 67 people. In a statement, Kenyan police said Mohammed Abdi Ali was arrested on Friday as a suspected member of an East African militant group with links to the Islamic State, which has seized large areas of Iraq and Syria and inspired offshoot groups elsewhere in the Middle East and in parts of Africa. The police statement revealed that suspect Ali worked as a medical intern at a hospital in eastern Kenya before his arrest and also studied at Kampala International University in neighboring Uganda. This is the first time terror is being linked to anthrax in Kenya, and investment has slowed to an extent in Kenya, partly due to the effects of travel advisories resulting from spate of terror attacks in parts of the country. And the Kenya shilling strengthened to its highest level since July of 2015 on Tuesday, as poor demand for dollars spurred a dollar sell-off by banks and non-governmental organizations. Commercial banks posted the shilling at 100 shillings and 80 cents buying and 100 shillings and 90 cents selling, up from the previous day's quotations. Traders say the shilling is likely to trade in a narrow band of 100 shillings and 50 cents buying and 101 shillings and 20 cents selling over the next few days. Last year, the shilling touched a 3.5-year low to the dollar, weighed down by concerns of a widening current account deficit and a stronger dollar globally. CBK is on record saying the current account deficit has now narrowed and inflation is within its limits, as well as foreign exchange reserves looking up in 2016. Gulf African Bank is set to cause a market upset in the banking sector after the Tier 3 lender announced plans to increase its branch network from 15 to 20 by close of 2016. In an interview with KTN Business, the bank's CEO, Abdallah Abdul Khalik, says the market was ripe for growth despite the ongoing uncertainties in the banking industry.
Customer numbers, we have now exceeded 70,000 customers within the branches that we have. And we would like to double that number in the near future through this initiative of branch expansion and channel rollout for our customers. Our financial performance has been very good. We had a record year in 2015 rather, with 81% growth, as you mentioned. And in fact, the growth has been across the board, not just from the P&L area, but also from customer acquisition, from increasing asset book, from the liabilities, customer deposits, all have recorded incredible growth during 2015. Okay, this was also part of our three-year plan. Three-year strategy plan that we have. It has worked very well for us, and we keep on renewing that plan year after year. So we are very much on track. We are looking for even higher growth during the next 3 years. We think Gulf African Bank still has a lot of ground to cover. Unlike other banks that have been established many years ago, where they have already taken their fair market share, we think ours is still out there. So our growth for the next 2 to 3 years will be above average, or we expect it to be above average, because we needed to cover the ground that we think is rightfully ours out there.
And the Kenya economy grew marginally by 5.6% in 2015 compared to 5.3% growth in 2014. This slight expansion is being attributed to a significant growth in sectors like agriculture, construction, real estate, financial and insurance sectors. However, growth in mining and quarrying, information and communication, and wholesale and retail trade decelerated during the period. This is according to the 2016 economic survey released by the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics. KTN's Philip Kitani reports. All motorists, that includes private and commercial, will actually have to have their cars inspected. If your car is 4 years and older than the date of its manufacture, then it will have to be subjected to fresh inspection by the National Transport Safety Authority before the end of 2016. Speaking to me yesterday, NTSA's Director Motor Vehicle Inspection, Gerard Wangai, said Kenyan motorists pay some of the lowest inspection fees across Africa. We're going to get back to that story just very shortly. Well, being told the story is now ready. Let's take a look at that story on vehicle inspection.
In 2014, the government announced that all private cars would be subject to annual inspections beginning 2015, but that was not to happen as the National Transport Safety Authority, NTSA, admitted to being incapacitated to take on the exercise.
Currently, we have 17 inspection centers. And if we are expected to inspect more than 2 million vehicles, we don't have the capacity to do that.
Right.
And that is why we have not been inspecting from the time the law came into effect, 2012.
The new rules that require all vehicles to have a certificate of inspection displayed on their windscreens will see owners of private cars part with between 2,600 and 3,900 shillings depending on the engine capacity. Motorcyclists will pay 1,300 shillings for the inspection, and three-wheeler operators will pay 2,600 shillings.
The motorists, the motorcyclists as well, have been saying that these rates are a bit on the higher side.
The rates which we have put there are the ones which were gazetted in 2011 to to operate with the Minister of, with the Mechanical and Transport Fund.
Yes.
If you look at the rates which are being charged in Britain, is 7,800 per vehicle.
Areas of interest for the inspection include shock absorbers, tires, headlights, battery life, indicators, brakes, and seat belts, among others. Used imported cars are subject to inspection every 2 years after landing, while newly purchased cars are subject to the same after 4 years. Commercial vehicles, however, going by the new rules, are subject to inspection every year. NTSA says the inspection is necessary to eliminate vehicles with dangerous mechanical condition off the roads in the country. Joy Doreen Bira, KTN News.
The government has been making massive improvements in easing of doing business, and the initiative is set to go a notch higher as Kenya plans to gather reforms from the Ease of Doing Business conference while showcasing and facilitating replication to pave way for a better business environment.
Ranked the third most reformed economy globally in the 2016 Ease of Doing Business report, which saw Kenya rise 28 places, up from position 136 in 2015 to position 108, signaling a changing business environment in the country. While a World Bank report shows that manufacturing has in the past 10 years stagnated, Kenya is making strides in making business swift in the country.
There has been some challenges about new tariffs that are being introduced, which is becoming an issue for concern for businesses. But we are dealing with that. But overall, it's this kind of conference that is exactly trying to deal with those kind of duplications.
CS of Industrialization Adan Muhammad is hosting 23 African representatives at the Ease of Doing Business conference aimed at leveraging digital platforms to deepen interaction with investors. But the bigger question is whether or not the conference is meaningful to small businesses in the country.
So we should be able to help with knowledge and examples of how this has been done elsewhere.
Kenya is straining its eyes on consolidating gains made around the signing into law of Companies, Insolvency and Special Economic Zones Acts.
Working with the private sector, we have come up with model laws on let's say finance bills and also licensing and everything.
But creating awareness on the changes made is what the Mwananchi argues needs to be done. One-stop shop for all state services such as business registration, connection of electricity, registration of property and increased access to credit are some of the queries that gave birth to KRA's iTax system, Nairobi County's e-construction permit system, e-GGPay, e-Citizen that have made it easy to do business. Ashley Mazuri, KTN Business.
Thanks, Ashley. Now, on our Twitter poll question this afternoon, we are asking who should take responsibility for the unsafe construction of buildings in Nairobi, capital city. Who should take responsibility for the unsafe construction of buildings in Nairobi? And the options we were giving you, should it be the NCA, that is the National Construction Authority, or should it be, the landlords, or should it be actually, the national government, or maybe the City Council? Who should take responsibility for this? As at 2 p.m., we were seeing those who said the NCA was responsible at 32%. Those who think the City Council was responsible was at 40%, while those who thought the landlords should take responsibility are at 11%. And the national government, those saying the national government should take some of this responsibility, is at 17%. That is from the Twitter poll with about 77 votes. Now, we have about 31 minutes left to take a look at the full results. But let's take a look at what some of you are saying online in regard to, the collapsing of buildings. But I guess we'll take a look at that a bit later. Now, let's take a look at what at Real Bill 254 is saying. Let's not put the blame on others. The owner of the building is perfectly aware of the roaming disaster. And Sally is saying everyone involved, even the residents, should take responsibility. So in studio, to further help us understand what exactly is going on in the capital city, we are joined by Stephen Oundo, who is the chairman of the National Construction Authority, and we have Isaac Kalua, who is the chairman for Green Africa, deals a lot with environmental issues, but also plays a key role in ensuring that we actually have the right kind of green, or do we say comply by most of the environmental regulations we have in the country today. In our city center studio, we have Johnson Denge, who is the services manager for real estate at Citon Investments. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you.
So the bigger question here is who should take responsibility for all these collapsing buildings? If we could take you through the history of these buildings, they date as far back as 2006 or even before that. So, Chairman, who do you think should take responsibility? Shouldn't you take responsibility?
A building is actually a team effort, and I think it's even good you've listed there. Is it the landlord?
Yes.
Is it the National Construction Authority?
Who actually seems to have the list of the percentage on
Yes,
taking up
of course, yeah.
responsibility.
Yeah, but let's put it this way. They all have a specific role. If you ask me, like a football team, goalkeeper, defenders, midfielders, attackers, everybody has a role. Now, as National Construction Authority, we've been playing the role at the construction stage. But even what do we do when we come to inspect at a site? We come to check, is there approval from the county government? Because we don't have that power to give approvals.
Yes.
We check, is there approval from NEMA? That is what we check. We check if the consultants, the architect, quantity surveyors, and engineers are registered. We check if the contractor is registered by the National Construction Authority. We also check if the construction site workers have also been registered by our authority. And you see, that is at one point. The real monitoring for construction should be continuous. You're actually supposed to be monitoring it right from the foundation all the way to the top. When we find anything wanting, we do, and I'm sure you've seen quite a number of sites within this country where we put our X. Now, where we have been incapacitated is the element if the developer proceeds with the development and yet we have put our X, what do? We have to rely on the police because we don't have prosecutional powers. And that is one of the things I was saying.
And so what happens after the X has been placed there? Because we are seeing the building, the recent building in Huruma did actually have the exact problem that we are looking at. It had been marked X, but nothing had been done.
But not by the National Construction Authority, because that particular building was put up, I think, about 9 years ago. If you know, National Construction Authority is actually a very new baby in the sense that it was just formed at the end of 2011. And its regulations only passed through Parliament in June of 2014. So essentially, we're just under 2 years. We're not actually 2 years in operations. So the responsibility on that actually wouldn't have come to us. But then, at the end of the day, there's what we call perception. The name National Construction Authority is almost all-encompassing. Everything falls under you. So I would have actually rewarded that statement, who should be responsible for buildings henceforth, and then give us all the powers from inception, which starts with the planning, then we come to the design, we come to construction, supervision.
So before we even get into the powers, I would like to hear Isaac's views on who exactly he thinks should take responsibility for all this unsafe construction ongoing in the capital today.
Thank you for having me, and thank you, and sorry for those who have lost lives in Huruma. It's a situation that could have been avoided. In my imagination, there are 5 areas even before we ask ourselves these questions. And these areas are very critical, and they are bringing in a lot of confusion to the public eye. One is buildings that have been built around or matters around riparian space. The second one could be issues on zoning of properties. The third one could be issues on issuance or change of ownership or a particular area that is being done. Fourth areas, I'm talking about change of use. The fourth area could be something on encroachment of forest land in particular areas. And the fifth one could be something on land ownership. All these areas, and when an investor wants to put up a building, they need to understand what is this zone. what is it about the change of user and what are you allowed to be able to do? Is it riparian space? Is it a situation that the zone does not allow you to do this? And therefore that it even happens before my brother starts dealing with these issues. And it takes us back to issues, Doreen, on integrity and how we must deal with issues. And this gets to who is dealing, as an investor.
Right.
Have you done the EIA as is expected? Was it done in the normal way that it was supposed to be done? Has it been influenced by other things that are not supposed to be known? So, because some of the authorities have actually been given fraudulently, and therefore it causes other issues. There is no way and no reason a building like Huruma, where we are talking about losing so many lives,
Right.
together with it, 67 other buildings were actually marked X to be brought down. And in the Kenya that we are, there will be an explanation. Or we did not have finances to bring this down, or we must have a human face to deal with this issue. We cannot just eject people out of their building.
Right.
But look at the repercussions. Lives have been dead.
Yes.
The monies that we were saying that was not budgeted for, now everybody is running to save these people. And there still stands right now, as we speak, 67 other buildings that were supposed to be brought down. And you can imagine why they should be there. It should be a matter of urgency. People should be leaving those buildings, and we should be leaving them safe. Therefore, it's a responsibility that is spread across.
So it's
You cannot just point it to one person. There
Right.
is the responsibility of the owner. Because why put up a building when you know that it will be brought down few years later because you did not follow the law?
But why rent one if you know that it has been marked X?
Yes, and that is it is all about awareness.
All right,
and
so-
therefore we need, hence this kind of a program that we are having.
Okay, so let's cross over to our City Center studio where the services manager for real estate at Saiton is Johnson, thank you so much for joining us. According to a report you released a while back, you say that 90% of buildings in Nairobi were constructed without permits. Tell us about this report and how dire is it, especially now that we are seeing a number of buildings going down?
Thank you, Doreen, for having me around. Basically, you realize that Nairobi and a part of approval comes in various ways. There's the structural integrity, as my fellow panelists say. There's the whole thing about the compliance with approval regulations that are there. Then there is the other thing of implementation of the approvals that are there. You realize that it stems back, while when the crisis comes, we more focus on the construction time of the structure or the building. It stems back even when you are doing the acquisition of the land. What is the land tenure around the property you're acquiring?
Right.
What is its user? What can it accommodate? And it all goes away. What we need to do, and as developers, as users, we need to treat a building as with a life cycle. It comes from all the way from origination. How was the land acquired? Is it zoned for the right development that you are putting there? Are we, like you look at last year, about mid last year, about August, the national or the Nairobi County government came up with a Regularization Act 2015, Building Code Regularization Act, which gave about 6 months of moratorium or perhaps a phase for people to comply. They had quoted about 50 units that were supposed to be demolished. This ended in February. Nothing has been done.
Clear, and that is
comes
where the
to-
problem is, because what we're looking at is your report that did indicate that 90% of buildings in Nairobi were constructed without permit, and then even after these rules are out, we are still seeing no action being taken. But what were the findings from your report as Saiton?
As I said, it ranges from various angles. There's the angle of just being able to get the approval. Some of them will be not necessarily structurally bad, but because they didn't have approval, and it stems back to
various reasons. For instance, some of the areas that you find most of this building, areas like, let me say, Dagoretti, areas like Kangemi, these were initially ancestral land. While they could be titles, most of these titles, perhaps they've not gone through proper legal succession for the current owners to have titles, for them to be able to obtain approvals. You look at areas of Eastlands, most of the lands did not have documents. And as the law is, or the council law is, you cannot really obtain approval without a title. So most of them could not come through the approval process. Then there's the whole thing about the structural integrity, the non-use of professionalism, and then the other part whereby while there's institution of professional being used, the implementation part of it's not done up to date.
All right, so some of the residents we spoke to actually said that they moved to areas like Huruma because of the affordability, and we know that, you know, the population increase in Nairobi has also caused demand for housing as well to shoot up. But what's the responsibility from the real estate point of view? How much of responsibility should real estate be taking?
Basically, and from even our report of affordability we released recently, the market is quite unaffordable with different income segmentation we put there. It's quite unaffordable. You'll need to, for instance, vary interest rates for a typical apartment to about 8%, and for detached houses to about 3% for you to be able to have the market affordability rise to a common person or an average person with an average income of between, because we had categorized between 25 to 50 in that manner, depending on the different estates in the town. But having said that, is that we also find some areas of improvement. You realize that we are more concerned, we are more living in Nairobi rather than taking advantage of devolution to get to settle in other parts of the country. We've seen an expansion into the satellite towns, but you realize in satellite towns, amenities and facilities to support proper development and to support proper environment are also lagging behind.
All right.
So it's a matter of
allow me, Johnson, allow me to bring in my other panelists. You know, Chairman, from what you actually said, you said that, you know, there's the bit of approvals that needs to be considered. But when you look at the construction standards in Nairobi city as well as across the country, there are a lot of questions that are being raised as well as to the construction material that is being used, the areas where these buildings are being put up. So from the National Construction Authority point of view, what are some of the considerations that anyone who is putting up a structure should have in mind before they even buy a certain piece of land?
Yeah, I think the very first starting point is your consultant. What do you want to put up? Most of the developments there, like in Huruma, everybody has seen there's an opportunity for doing housing, okay? Yeah. Now, are you using an architect to design for you? Is that architect following the laid down procedures in terms of the zoning, in terms of ground coverage? Because really, by the way, the developers, and by the way, let's take one thing very clearly, even though the developments are going on in a low income area, like the Huruma, the owners of those buildings are not poor people. They have serious resources, and they're also ready to go to any length in terms of, I would say, bribing their way. And if somebody has an approval for 3 stories and you go to site, they're doing 6 stories. Yeah. You wonder how that happens. Of course, that's where the other element comes in, so where the enforcement agencies. But now this particular section and this Huruma area, if you look at the origin of it, if I'm not wrong, the ownership, and I think that has just been picked out from them. You had scenarios where people got share certificates for the land, so you cannot get approval to build. And what does somebody tell you? What you do, just build something, so that it's not taken away from you. And then you had a vicious cycle in the sense everybody was seeing what the other is doing. And and let's be very honest, people were watching. So now here we are. We had a population of about 800,000, I think, around approaching 1980. Yeah. Now I think we are at about 3.1. By 2030, we'll be at around 5.2. development has been going ahead of planning. Okay?
Yeah.
That is why if you go and look at what's even happening in Ongata, Rongai and all these places, you're wondering where the road's supposed to be.
Yeah,
But we
because-
have that problem right now.
Yeah.
I've taken office, if you're saying. That's what I have found. So how do we do it? When they were doing the audits of the buildings, you'll find there'll be 3 levels of developments that you'll find. You'll find developments that they need to be knocked down tomorrow. Their structural integrity is too much of a risk, and this building is one of them. You'll find another category of buildings where, with some input of professionals, they can reinforce it structurally, and it can be given a clean bill of health. That's what regularization is all about.
But let's talk about, you know, the stories or the number of stories. You are an architect.
Yes.
And going by what's happening in places like Huruma and other places around the country where we've seen collapsed buildings, by the time somebody puts up, say, a 6-story building, let's take an example of the collapsed building in Huruma. You know, the first 2 floors sunk in and then collapsed the rest of the 4 floors. What does this mean? What does this say about the foundation of that area?
There was no involvement of a qualified architect and engineer, in my opinion, right from the onset. You know, even when you design your buildings, you're supposed to come and do trial pits. You're supposed to come and do a geotechnical study to know what kind of soils we have there, so that you design what kind of foundation. We have so many types of different foundations. But what happens within the construction sector, there is this culture of, I use the word ujuaji.
Yes.
Everybody shows you how you can do it cheaper. Okay?
How you can
And
do
they
it
even
cheaper,
have
yeah.
this element of even telling you, if you go to an architect, he's going to charge you so much. Let me show you how
let me show
we
you
can
how
do
it's
it.
done.
And I have done so many. Okay?
All
And
right.
maybe some of them are just standing by the sheer grace of God.
All right.
It's only when you have a scenario like this, like the rains that you had then, that the true integrity of that building comes
All right,
up.
Isaac, this building that collapsed, let's get back to it because now it's forming the, you know, the case study of what we are talking about today. It was constructed just a few meters away from a river bank, and then this river happened to have burst its banks, and probably it's not the first time that it's bursting its banks, but maybe this could have been the limit where, you know, the river burst its banks and then the water came in and sunk probably the buildings. But let's talk about the environmental factors here. What are some of the things we are overlooking as the population surges in Nairobi and buildings are still continuing to be put up?
It should be known to all and sundry that there are laws and rules that govern this kind of construction in these areas. The riparian space is clearly indicated how far you can build and what kind of construction can be done in such areas. The survey law is very clear. The Warma law is also, and regulations are clear, and also MCA, which is governed by NEMA.
Right.
And in all, the nearest is actually the NEMA one, which is about 9 meters, or 2 times the size of the river. The others is 60 meters, including even how far you can build from the ocean by the survey laws.
Right.
This is very clear. Now, let's not even talk about a building that has gone down. Let us focus on a building that is known by most Kenyans. It has been raised and it is still going on. We are talking of a building that is opposite T-Mall along Langata Road. The presentation, it is in public domain, that the documents that were presented to NEMA for approval are completely different from what was approved. The river was not in consideration when this was actually done. There is no approval that is done in the way an approval that is supposed to be done by the laws of this government of Kenya, but pure impunity. I don't know who owns this building. I don't know why they are not seeing the risk of this kind of a situation, and the building is still going on. And funny enough, there is even a next building that is coming up along the river, clearly operating with impunity. What are we supposed to do in this kind of a situation as a country? Because it's an issue of awareness. As I said, Huruma was only one. We have lost lives. All we are now spending is a lot of money. Red Cross is doing a tremendous job that they will always do. Thank God we sold the angel after 4 days after all this, but how many people have been messed up?
Yes.
People need to move out of these buildings. A building like the one in Langata Road must stop now. And my solution is very clear, in my imagination. And I hope the president can take up this, and our very able minister for environment.
Yes.
We need to have a task force that is working towards getting to identify and audit, and working together with my brother's organization here to identify who and which building is done along the rivers. We only have 3 rivers in the city of Nairobi. We know therefore how many rivers, how many buildings are along these rivers. How many other, the 4 issues that I talked about, earmark these buildings. And those buildings, if we are able to be bold enough to ban ivory tusks, what is bringing down a building? Look at even a situation at KWS, where we have now had to build a road inside the park, simply because someone went out and sold the property. It should have been the other way around.
But someone actually mentioned and said that, you know, all we're doing is condemning and condemning and condemning, but there's no action that's being taken. I remember on the day or the morning after the building collapsed in Huruma, NCA actually came out and said that the owner of the building did not have an occupation certificate. But what should have been done before then, if he actually managed to put up 6 floors or 6 stories of a building without an occupation certificate? What exactly is going on here? And I know that, you know, there's corruption all around the place, but what exactly is being done to ensure that this doesn't happen again?
I was saying, and I think I was, as you said, I was quite on site quite early. The concept of the understanding what an occupation certificate is the culmination that the whole process of construction, right from design, planning, construction, supervision, has been done properly as per the building code. The building has been certified as safe for occupation and for the function for which it has been designed. If we all said we're not entering any building if it doesn't have that, don't wait for NCA to come and ask you whether you have an occupation. We just take that as Kenyans and we say, we think that document is very important. Of course, there's going to be the Pandora's box. People say that because of corruption, people are going to buy it. Let's deal with that as a separate problem. But if generally we say we want to make that change, this building didn't have it, okay? This building came even before the inception of National Construction Authority.
Right.
But solutions, starting point, that is what I would really like to
And also
here.
adding on that very clearly. You see, this country yearns for people who can take up responsibility. I'll give you an example of Tanzania. Tanzania, the president today was actually elected because during the time that he was Minister for Transport, he took on his own hands to destroy all the houses that were built on the space that was supposed to be road space. And people want this kind of a person. No wonder he's a president today. And people may imagine that Magufuli is just a passing cloud. I don't think he is, because he has come in very consistently. And we need people to wake up and deal with some of these issues in the way that we must be able to do. My organization is working on green building standards. I think it's also an issue of building standards that can be trusted, and where that sign, whenever any Kenyan, any person who understands what that is, may take up and agree that, yes, I want to be part of this. But awareness, I believe we are coming from somewhere. And this is not the time to blame each other. This is the time to take action. From the person, the individual in the owner of the building, the land, and all that must be able to be done to deal with issues conclusively, knowing that there is the rule of law. And then, see, after the loss of people of lives in Huruma, the guy is free on a 1 million bond.
All right, so there needs to be tougher laws to deal with
Daktari
this.
has mentioned something. He took us very near here to Tanzania. And I just want to tell you, even in terms of case studies and best practices, the equivalent of the registrar of contractors in Tanzania has got such strong powers. If he walks into any area, when they hear he's in town, and he points at a building and said, this building doesn't meet it, demolition is immediate.
All right,
of course, in our scenario here, you know what happens? Court injunctions.
Yes.
The building you're
Court
talking about at
injunctions, indeed.
T-Mall,
Let's
court.
cross over to our city center
Yes.
studio, lest we forget that we also have a real estate expert on that side. But Johnson, let me bring you in again. Affordability, on the issue of affordability, when you look at areas like, say, Eastlands, you get the feeling that those areas are more affordable, for instance, compared to Westlands. And your recent report on housing also did indicate the number of areas that were the most unaffordable in the capital city today, and also, of course, those that were more affordable than the rest of them. And actually, Githurai came up as one of the most affordable areas to live in the capital today, as opposed to areas like Muthaiga and Karen and such like areas. But what does this say about us and the decisions that we make before we take up some of these housing outlets?
I think I'll agree with also my fellow panelists that we need, when you're looking for this, you need to maybe look at an occupational certificate as a proof that all the process from contractual appointment to implementation to the final delivery of the product has gone through the requisite requirement, and it was inspected, and it was given a clean bill. As we always say, that it will be very unfortunate should somebody be able to buy a unit that will collapse the following day, and that is calls for institutionalization of the whole industry. You find that in most of these areas and the type of buildings that end up collapsing is because they are not institutionalized. We've seen a lot of development in institutionalization and people coming up, IRITs coming up, several companies, Saiton is one of them, Home Africa and others, coming up and trying to put in some procedure, and so that even the end consumer can now identify with a brand or a certain developer. Because you realize in history, all the buildings that have had a problem were individually done. And when it's a one-man show, rules can be bent because people are looking for profits, so they can easily bend rules. But when you institutionalize, then the responsibility goes higher, because you want to have, you are holding investor money, you are holding, you want to also bring in a product that is sound. So basically, for buyers out there, look for, buy from an institutionalized developer. Again, make sure that all the requisite procedures were followed, so that, and this is through getting an occupation certificate, and that will be it.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, Johnson. And Chairman, let me come to you as we come to a conclusion. Before anyone, goes out there looking for land to buy, before anyone goes out there, spending billions or millions of shillings on certain properties, what are some of the considerations they need to know to be able to stay away from situations like what we have had recently?
I think he's put it very well. We have to start looking at institutionalization.
Yeah.
I think a simple test like the building, if it's a property you want to buy, is it insurable? The insurance will not give you a cover if that building does not have the requisite approvals, okay? Which of course builds up to the occupation certificate. The financiers of the project, who are the banks, the banks will not give you they'll not give you money to buy a property if you cannot produce an occupation certificate. I like what they're doing right now. They've even gone to a further stage, and they're actually saying if they're funding a project and the contractor is not registered by the National Construction Authority, or you've not actually paid the levy, they're also tying that to the loan. It sort of has to be something where we are all bringing our strengths together with the sole purpose of doing the right thing. Any construction site, even during construction, there is also insurance.
Yes.
Okay? And the contractor takes out an insurance policy that is supposed to take care of the any eventualities. Because you have to remember, in any case, construction is being done by man. And man and human is to error. That's why there's that safeguard of an insurance policy. The reason also I also would want you to do is, if you've looked at a project, you have consultants who have been involved in it, and something happens, you have a reprieve for compensation.
All right.
The last small thing I would just like to add, which I think is important, sorry, Daktari, even after the occupation certificate, that is another thing, it doesn't end there. A building that was completed 15 years ago, you can't rely on the occupation certificate of 15 years ago. We have to have a maintenance policy where buildings are going to be maintained every 5 years, inspected periodically and confirming that the function for which the building is being used now, if it was designed as a classroom, it's now not being used as a hotel because the design requirements are different.
That's true.
Thank
All
you.
right, Isaac, would like to hear your final remarks, probably in the strongest words possible. How better can we put the message forward that the environment needs to be considered as well when we are putting up these structures for both residential and commercial purposes?
Responsibility, issues of integrity, and action must follow and work together. There is a lot of confusion that we are sending to the public. You find that one organization in NEMA has given authority. You get to a county government, there is confusion. They have allowed this, one has disallowed the other one. This kind of confusion is bringing down a lot of development ideas that are in place. The Vision 2030 is anchored on projects that must be dealt with a lot of respect to the environment.
Right.
We are going to lose them, and particularly investors, because nobody is going to come and invest in a country where the rule of law is not respected. People must wake up and do what they must be able to do. I humbly suggest, as I said earlier on, let there be a team that is set up, anchored and working together with the Ministry of Environment and the National Construction Authority,
Right.
to get authority and be guided by the presidency, to bring down all those bad things that have been done previously, and now set up the country in a route that will be able to implement and encourage investors in this country in a big way.
Right.
The time for action is now, and environmental issues are equivalent to the success of our people, and we
Right.
cannot just allow to lose lives. Action is now.
Okay, we need to take action as well and consider responsibility, integrity, and action as a follow-up. I'd like to say thank you so much to my panelists, Isaac Kalua, who is the chairman of the Green Africa, is it a foundation? Green Africa Foundation, and we also had Stephen Ondo, who is the chairman of the National Construction Authority. And at our City Center studio, we've been speaking to Johnson Denge, who is the Real Estate Services Manager at Saiton Investments. Thank you all for joining us in this edition. And can't go through all the tweets that came through, but let me read just two of them. Nyawera Oshiru Mwaniki is saying, every one of them, that is the NCA, the City Council, the landlord, as well as the national government, should take responsibility. All of them are responsible, as each had a part to play. And we're having one coming through from Victor 254, who is saying, I guess everybody needs to take responsibility here. Well, quite a number of them. And someone actually says the devil should take responsibility for what's happening with this collapsing of buildings in Nairobi. But thank you all for your feedback. The conversation continues online. My name is Joy Doreen Bira. Coming up next is News Hour with Sharon Momanyi.